Let's take a moment and get a better handle on what I mean when I talk about information superabundance and get some sort of grasp about just the nature of the sheer amount of information that is available through just the internet alone. So, when I think about information superabundance, what I'm really thinking about is that modern human information ecosystems have become so vast and complex, having so much information, that finding the needed information in this vast horizonless sea of data has become as crucial to human flourishing as generating the information itself. And so we can kind of understand information superabundance as a point at which finding information within an information ecosystem becomes as cognitively challenging as collecting information from the environment itself. And hence, the ecosystem starts to have no greater value than the environment. So let's try and get a handle on just how much information is available just through the internet. What is the claim I'm making about information superabundance cashed out? So let's look at it in some useful kind of metaphorical ways. So if we think about increasing information going in this direction, and we think about superabundance measured in terms of the spatial horizon of our information environment, then we can see just how large the information environment has got. Till approximately about 12,000, 10,000 years ago, human beings lived a hunter-gatherer existence, and they basically roamed an area of about 100 square kilometers. So somewhere between around 50 square miles or so. And that was their information environment. That was the spatial distance from which they collected information. What about now? Well, in 2019, what we find is that in astronomical studies, we're looking at things that are over 30 billion light years away. In some cases, maybe approximately 32 billion light years away. So our spatial horizon has gone from 100 square kilometers to something like 32 billion light years. So the size explosion of our information environment is just staggering, really. Think about the temporal horizon. So how much time can we gather information about? How much can we know about the past as well as the present? Well, till approximately about 50,000 years ago, with the advent of spoken languages, really what an individual had available to them was largely what they had in their own head, maybe what they could communicate crudely with other members of their small group. Most individuals lived between 26 and 42 years, and so probably generous to say that they had access to maybe approximately 100 years. That was their sort of temporal extent of their information environment. What about now? Well, now, again, through astronomy, we're able to look back at the history of the universe, going back nearly 14 billion years. So again, the sheer temporal dimensions of our information environment are staggering. Just think about sheer numbers. So January 29th, 2019 at 8:52 p.m. Pacific time, the estimate that I looked at for the size just of the internet, and specifically of the indexed internet, was 1,952,686,715 websites. And again, this is just the indexed website, which is a very small percentage of the internet. There's the dark web, where access to information is controlled through authorization, through specialized software, etc., etc. And then there is the deep web that just isn't indexed at all. Right? And those are the vast majority of sites, sources on the web. So this isn't even a measurement of the web, it's just a measurement of the indexed web. There are at least 5.39 billion web pages in those websites. So staggering amount of information. But again, how can we get that into context? How can we get a sense of just how super abundant information is? Well, one way to do it is to look at it in the context of information repositories from the past. So the oldest known library was the library at Elba, which is in Syria, and it dates from about 2500 BCE, somewhere in there, to 2250 BCE. There's a picture of the ruins of the library. There's a picture of a tablet that was recovered there, and it's estimated that this knowledge repository, the oldest one that we know of, had between 5,000 and 7,500 tablets. Right? And each of the tablets had about as much information as you might see there. When we look at the library of Ashurbanipal in Nivea, Mosul, nowadays, it was in existence approximately 668 BCE to 627 BCE. It was a Assyrian king. Here are the ruins of that library, and I mean ruins, they were bombed. There's a tablet that was recovered there, and it's estimated that they had about 30,000 tablets in that knowledge repository. So 668 BCE, and now we've got 30,000 tablets. So a dramatic increase, and yet really not that much. Library at Alexandria in Egypt, the library created by Alexander the Great, one of the many libraries, probably created around 285 BCE to about 246 BCE. There's a depiction of it. It was destroyed utterly and completely. These are some scrolls that are thought to have been in that library at one point. And it's estimated that that library, the library in Alexandria, had between 40,000 and 400,000 scrolls. So it was a huge complex that had a fairly large repository of information. What about now? Well, the U.S. Library of Congress, which one of the largest libraries, national libraries in the world, one or two anyway. There's a picture of it. It has approximately 164 million items. Okay? And there are other differences too. So if you wanted to get any information from the Library at Alexandria, you had to go there and you had to find it. And as you can see, the organizational system wasn't spectacular. A huge part of the collection of the Library of Congress is actually available through the internet. So you don't have to travel to that repository anymore to get information from that repository. So that gives you some sense of just the enormous exponential increase in the amount of information that's available to people, and really the ease with which they have access to it in some sense. But that enormous volume has created with it an enormous problem. How do I find the right information? How do I get at the stuff I really want when there is so much information out there available for me? In other words, how do I go from something like this, where I'm just trying to find the right scroll in this pile of scrolls? Well, what we want to do in the next lecture is look at the way the visual system dealt with its superabundance of information.